Diego Fernández Lima was the firstborn of Juan Benigno Fernández and Ilma Lima, although some sources claim that his mother's name was Bernabella. Growing up in the neighborhood of Villa Urquiza, in Argentina's vibrant capital, Buenos Aires, Diego was a 16-year-old full of dreams and passions. The most ardent of them was soccer, a sport he practiced fervently on the youth team of Club Atlético Excursionistas, where he was seen as a key player. Diego had a younger brother, Javier, and a sister, Marcela. The family led a simple routine, but one filled with affection and hope. In 1984, Diego was attending the National School of Technical Education, which provided local youth with vocational and technical training. This complemented his desire to become a professional soccer player with the prospect of an alternative career. On Thursday, July 26, 1984, Diego returned home from school at noon after a joyful ride on his beloved motorcycle. He shared lunch with his mother and later asked her for money for a bus fare. With a smile, Diego said he was going to a friend's house, without revealing who, and that afterward he would attend the technical school to participate in a workshop. He was wearing brown boots, jeans, a casual shirt, and the tie from his school uniform, and as he left, he was eating a tangerine. By 8:30 that evening, Diego's absence became worrisome. His parents, Juan and Ilma, decided to begin a frantic search. They combed the neighborhood, visited friends and teammates' houses, questioning everyone about their son's whereabouts. The answer was always the same. No one had seen Diego since the afternoon. The anguish grew when they discovered that Diego had not attended the technical school that afternoon, contrary to what he had told them. The revelation that he had not followed his usual routine put Juan and Ilma on high alert. The search for Diego intensified, but with every closed door and every empty street, the mystery surrounding his disappearance deepened. Diego's parents, with heavy hearts, could not understand how their son, a responsible and dedicated young man, could simply vanish without a trace. The community, united in concern, joined the search, but the darkness of the night seemed to conceal more than reveal about the fate of the young aspiring soccer player. The case of Diego Fernández Lima began to unfold as a disturbing enigma, leaving everyone around him in a growing state of anxiety. Diego's parents, Juan and Ilma, desperate over their son's disappearance, went to the federal police station in Argentina. Upon arrival, they expected to find a team ready to launch a thorough investigation. However, the reality was quite different. The officer who attended them minimized the situation, suggesting that Diego might be at a girlfriend's house and would soon return, without giving proper attention to the parents' account. Juan and Ilma were deeply disappointed by the authorities' lack of commitment. They knew their son was extremely responsible and would never give them cause for unfounded worry. The police, aware of Diego's reputation as a serious young man, also believed he would soon show up or contact them to let them know he was safe. However, Diego's family faced a major barrier. The authorities did not treat the case with the seriousness it required. No official report was filed, and Diego's disappearance was not made a priority by the police. This was partly due to the technological limitations of the time. In 1984, there were no personal computers or cell phones, which made communication and the search for clues much more difficult. What the technical school confirmed was that Diego had never arrived that afternoon. The uncertainty about his whereabouts grew by the hour, since he had not mentioned who the friend was. With no means to verify whether he had ever gone to this supposed friend's house, the family and investigators were left in the dark. Unsure if he had even begun the second part of his daily routine, the authorities' lack of action left Diego's family in an agonizing situation. Days passed with no news of the young man. The parents' sense of abandonment and the police's Slowness to act contrasted with their urgency and despair, leaving them powerless before a system that seemed unable to grasp the gravity of the situation. The narrative of Diego Fernández Lima's disappearance began to intertwine with official negligence and the difficulties of a pre-digital era, when searching for a missing loved one was a maze of uncertainty and scarce resources. The situation took an even more dramatic turn when an acquaintance reported having seen Diego near Monroe Avenue and Nyon Avenue at the border of the neighborhoods of Villa Urquiza, Belgrano, and Coghlan. This acquaintance had called out to Diego using the nickname Gaita, a moniker he shared with his teammates at Club Atlético Excursionistas. Faced with the authorities' neglect, Juan and Ilma refused to surrender to despair. They took the initiative of distributing leaflets with detailed information about Diego, his age, height, physical characteristics, and the description of the clothes he was wearing the day he disappeared. Each phone call, with a possible lead, reignited the family's hope. Juan, Diego's father, who worked as an auto parts salesman, dedicated himself tirelessly to the search for his son. In an interview with an Argentine magazine, published in article form in 1986, he revealed that he kept a notebook where he recorded every piece of information that might help find Diego. Juan began collecting newspaper clippings and gathering data about the disappearance of other children, even visiting the parents of those victims to offer support and exchange information. Juan's obsession with finding his son led him to formulate theories. He came to firmly believe that Diego had been kidnapped by a cult, a hypothesis he extended to other cases of child disappearance. The lack of concrete answers and the accumulation of similar cases fueled this belief, turning the search for Diego into a personal crusade against a menace that Juan feared was far greater than an isolated act. With every new lead and every meeting with other desperate parents, Juan became more convinced of the existence of a sinister network behind the disappearances. The pain of losing a son turned into a quixotic struggle against impunity, and the mystery surrounding not only Diego's fate but also that of many other children whose faces began to haunt Juan's dreams and nightmares. The search for Diego became a symbol of the struggle of many Argentine families against the indifference and inefficiency of the system as they tried to uncover the dark secrets behind the disappearances. Juan, Diego's father, until his final days, held firmly to the belief that his son had fallen victim to a cult or to organ trafficking, theories that the family seriously considered in the absence of answers. The proximity in time to the end of the Argentine dictatorship also led Javier, Diego's younger brother, to consider the possibility that his disappearance might have been connected to the excesses of the authoritarian regime that had dominated the country until shortly before. Juan, with unshakable determination, made the search for Diego his daily routine. He often rode his bicycle through the streets of Buenos Aires, showing flyers with his son's picture and information. He followed his instincts, convinced that somewhere Diego was still waiting to be found. However, on December 10th, 1991, 7 years after Diego's disappearance, tragedy struck the family. While searching for his son as usual, Juan was hit by a van while riding his bicycle. The fatal accident left Ilma, Diego's mother, alone to raise Javier and Marcela. Even after Juan's death, Ilma never gave up hope of Diego's return. Ilma continued to live in the same house, nurturing the hope that Diego would one day come back. Javier, looking at his mother years later, still often saw her leaning against the window, gazing into the distance, waiting for her missing son to return. The matriarch, even as the years passed and she reached the age of 87, held on to that belief. The family, as an act of resistance and hope, never changed their landline phone number or home address. They believed that if Diego ever managed to return or make contact, he would know where to find them. The house remained a beacon, an anchor of hope amid the darkness of the unknown, waiting for the return of the young man who had vanished on a July afternoon in 1984. The story of Diego and his family became a painful portrait of human resilience in the face of the inexplicable and of loss. The Fernández Lima family's saga in search of Diego, their missing son, was marked by decades of tireless efforts and a series of false leads. Despite their Herculean efforts, they never obtained a concrete clue that would lead them to Diego. The years turned into decades, and the mystery persisted, shrouded in a veil of silence and speculation. So, in 2025, an unexpected discovery brought a new chapter to the story. Construction workers, while digging in the garden of a house in the Coghlan neighborhood of Buenos Aires, unearthed fragments that appeared to be human bones. Marcos Arcifa, the architect in charge of the work, witnessed the moment when Cristian Pereira Godoy, one of the bricklayers, reported that the ground had given way, revealing human remains, including a skull. Alarmed, Marcos and Christian called the authorities. Ingrid Graf, the owner of the house, also contacted the police. The location of the find on Congreso Avenue drew attention for being just 7 blocks from the place where Juan, Diego's father, had tragically been run over years earlier. The investigation was promptly initiated by prosecutor Martín López Perando, who determined the need to identify the victim and the cause of death. To this end, he summoned the Argentine Forensic Anthropology Team, EAAF, an NGO renowned for its work in identifying hundreds of disappeared persons during the Argentine dictatorship, 1976-1983. On May 29th, the EEF, under the direction of Mariela Fumagalli, carried out an anthropological intervention on site. The team, specialized in excavating and analyzing human remains in contexts of human rights violations, aimed to obtain detailed information and interpret the circumstances in which the bones were found. They collected 151 bone fragments, along with other belongings buried in the back of the house. The discovery of these remains rekindled both hope and fear in the Fernández Lima family. Could this be the definitive clue they had been searching for? Careful analysis of the bones and the recovered objects could finally reveal Diego's fate. The EAF team would work with the precision of forensic detectives, piecing together the puzzle of an interrupted life, while the family anxiously awaited answers that might finally bring closure to a painful chapter in their history. The discovery of the bones in the Coghlan neighborhood proved to be a crucial turning point in the investigation into Diego's disappearance. The site where the remains were found was a central wall on the property, but not a concrete wall, rather a green wall formed by dense vegetation. Mariela Fumagalli, director of the EAF, explained that the original burial site seemed to be located on the neighboring property, and that construction machinery could have displaced the bones into the adjacent lot. Most of the 151 bone fragments were recovered by specialists from the police's mobile forensic unit. Analia González Simoneto, a member of the forensic anthropology team, told the BBC that the fragments had been taken to the laboratory for detailed examination to determine whether they belonged to one or more individuals. After analysis, it was concluded that the bones belonged to a single individual, a teenager estimated to be between 15 and 18 years old, in order not to exclude possible missing persons within that age range. The analysis also determined that it was a young male, approximately 1.72 meters tall. The forensic specialist noted several cuts on the bones, indicating the use of at least 2 different blades. Ana Leah highlighted a particularly notable cut on the left side of the chest at the level of the 4th rib, which resembled a stab wound. In addition, there were cuts on other joints, probably made with a different blade. these discoveries raised more questions than answers. The precision of the cuts suggested a deliberate and perhaps even premeditated act. The investigation would continue with the hope that DNA analysis and other forensic methods could finally identify the remains and clarify the circumstances of the death. Diego's family, still living under the weight of uncertainty, awaited anxiously for any information that might bring closure to the story that had dragged on for years. Mariella, the EIF director, clarified that the evidence clearly pointed to a case of homicide. The injury to the rib could have been fatal or merely one of many assaults suffered by the victim. The presence of distinct cuts on the upper limbs and hip indicated the use of different blades, and the nature of the cuts on the joints suggested an attempt at dismemberment, which was later confirmed by prosecutor Martín López Perando Analia. Another member of the team confirmed that the death had been extremely violent, but the degradation of the bones over the years made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death. It could have been the injuries caused by the blades or some other form of brutal violence. In addition to the bones, the team found some items that could help identify the victim. A label from jeans or a jacket from the brand UFO, a pair of socks, and leather items that appeared to be from boots were discovered. The municipal police also found a calculator watch, a blue tie, an orange keychain, and a coin. The tie, in particular, seemed to be part of a school uniform, common in the 1980s and 1990s, which helped rule out the theory that the death was related to the dictatorship, since the regime had ended in 1983. The results of the biological profile were sent to the public prosecutor's office, and DNA samples were collected for comparison with possible relatives. With the genetic profile in hand, the investigation could now be cross-referenced with records of missing persons from the 1980s and 1990s. The hope was that among those cases, the DNA of the victim would match that of a family still searching for answers, perhaps even the Fernández Lima family. The discovery of these items and the detailed forensic analysis represented a significant breakthrough, shedding new light on a crime that had remained hidden for decades. The media coverage of the case brought an unexpected twist. At first, it was believed that the bones had been found in the house of Gustavo Cerati, one of Latin America's most important artists. However, this information was later corrected. Cerati had lived in the house next door between 2002 and 2004, long after the demolition of the house where the bones were discovered. The visibility of the case, fueled by the media's mistake, ended up helping the investigation. Diego's family, upon learning of the victim's characteristics and the location of the discovery, began to hope that the bones could belong to him. The presence of items, such as the calculator watch and the blue tie, similar to those Diego used to wear, strengthened this suspicion. The Fernández Lima family contacted the prosecutor's office and the Argentine forensic anthropology team, expressing their belief that the remains might be Diego's. The victim's age range, male sex, and height of 1.72 meters matched Diego's characteristics, who had disappeared at the age of 16. Now, with the possibility of identification through DNA, the family awaited anxiously for the genetic comparison. The hope of finally obtaining answers after so many years of uncertainty was palpable. The investigation would continue with the analysis of the items found and the comparison of the DNA with that of relatives of missing persons fitting the established profile. The possibility that Diego had been found rekindled the flame of hope in the family, who had always kept alive the memory of the young man and the pursuit of justice. The genetic match between the bones found and the profile of Diego's mother, Ilma, was confirmed, bringing the family a mix of relief and sorrow. The media reported that the bones belonged to Diego Fernández Lima, which led to new revelations. A call to the public prosecutor's office came from a former high school classmate of Diego's, who reported that Norberto Christian Graf, another classmate from that time, lived in the house where the bones were found. The Graf family had lived at the site since 1974, which included the period when Diego disappeared. In light of this information, on August 12, 2025, the prosecutor charged Norberto Christian Graf with aggravated concealment and obstruction of evidence, requesting that he be summoned to testify. Diego's death was confirmed as violent, but regardless of the cause, the laws of Buenos Aires prohibit burial on private property. Bodies must be interred in cemeteries or other appropriate places. Rolando Medina Rodas, one of the construction workers on the site, stated in his testimony that Christian Graf seemed extremely worried about the discovery. He tried to persuade the workers to ignore the bones and continue building. Rolando also mentioned that Christian forbade the removal of a small tree next to a banana tree, which made no sense since the work involved building a new central wall on the property to replace the old green wall. This suspicious behavior by Christian raised further questions about his possible involvement in the case. The ban on touching the tree could have been related to an attempt to preserve the spot where the bones were found, perhaps to prevent more evidence from coming to light. The investigation would continue to delve into the life of Norberto Christian Graf and his relationship with Diego, in the hope of unraveling the mysteries surrounding the disappearance and death of the young aspiring football player. Faced with the discovery of the bones at the construction site, the workers noticed Christian Graf's peculiar behavior. He tried to control the workers' actions, especially when they approached the wall where the bones were found. When the remains came to light, Christian sought explanations for the presence of the skeletal remains on the property. First, he suggested that there might have been a church there in the past, and that priests could have used the space for burials. Later, another worker reported that Christian had offered a different explanation. He said the site had once housed a stable and that, when leveling the land, the family might have received soil that already contained bones. These explanations, however, seemed absurd and unlikely even to the workers. Prosecutor Martín López Perando, aware of these accounts, believed that Christian's behavior indicated he had something to hide. His excessive concern and attempts to divert attention from the bones led the prosecutor to request a formal interrogation of Christian. A judge needed to approve the request, and although Christian had already appeared before the National Criminal and Correctional Prosecutor's Office, he had not yet been formally charged. The investigation continued to unfold, with the prosecution seeking to clarify the circumstances of Diego's disappearance and death, and to determine whether Christian Graf had any connection to the crime. Tension grew as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Diego's family, having already endured years of silence and pain, now saw the possibility of justice drawing nearer. The investigation into the case of Diego Fernández Lima remained, an example of how the pursuit of truth and justice can be long and complex, but also of how seemingly insignificant clues can lead to crucial discoveries. Christian Graf seemed reluctant to testify about what he and his family knew regarding Diego's bones. However, he did not explicitly refuse to cooperate. In a chance encounter with reporters, a journalist directly asked whether he was Diego's killer, but Christian remained silent, offering no answer. The prosecutor in the case reconstructed the events, revealing that Diego and Christian were not close friends in high school, but shared a passion for motorcycles. After transferring to the technical school, they became classmates. Christian advanced to the third year, while Diego repeated the second year. Their shared passion for motorcycles kept them in contact even after Diego had repeated the school year. Diego's family preserved his motorcycle as a keepsake, a tangible symbol of his memory and of the hope that he would one day return. Other classmates described Christian as a reserved, quiet person, nicknamed Giraffe because of his height. Diego was last seen just 5 blocks from Christian's house, a 2-story residence where his mother lived on the ground floor and Christian lived upstairs with his wife. In 2025, Christian is 58 years old and is considered a suspect in Diego's murder. However, he is not the only one under investigation. Authorities are interested in understanding whether Christian's mother or other family members knew that the body was buried on the property. The investigation seeks to uncover the truth behind Diego's disappearance, exploring all possible connections and involvement. The discovery of the bones on the Graff family property raises questions about whether other family members were complicit in or aware of the crime. Police and prosecutors are working to assemble a complete picture of events, analyzing every detail and personal relationship in search of answers that might finally bring justice to Diego's family and close a painful chapter in their history. Argentine authorities continue to investigate the case of Diego Fernández Lima, keeping open the possibility that people other than Christian Graff may be involved in the crime. Suspicion falls on individuals who had access to the house where the bones were found, since the murder appears to have taken place on the property, even though the crime of murder has already expired due to the time elapsed. The authorities are determined to clarify the facts. It is believed that Diego went to Christian's house on the day of his disappearance, where something tragic happened, leading to his murder. It is still necessary to determine the identity of the killer and the motive behind the crime. Diego's school and sports community, including the school he attended and the soccer team he played for, sent messages of condolence to the family. Javier, Diego's younger brother, expressed a complex mix of emotions upon receiving confirmation of the identity of the remains: anger, helplessness, sadness, but also a sense of relief at finally having an answer after 41 years of uncertainty. He believes this will help the family find some peace and give Diego a dignified burial. Christian Graff's lawyer tried to refute the archaeological allegations, claiming that the bones were found on the neighboring property, not in Christian's house. In his defense, Christian argued that the bones appeared during the excavation of a new wall that did not exist previously. This legal strategy seeks to dissociate Christian and his family from responsibility for the presence of the remains at that location. The narrative of Diego's case is marked by an unrelenting search for truth and justice, and the discovery of the remains offers a painful but necessary closure for the family. The investigation continues with the hope that the truth will come to light and that justice, even if delayed, will be served. Christian Graff, under suspicion, defends himself by claiming that he was not close to Diego and does not remember the events that led to the young man's disappearance. He insists on his innocence, arguing that the discovery of the bones does not imply his guilt. One point that could be used in his defense is the fact that it was his sister, Ingrid Graff, who alerted the authorities about the discovery of the bones, which, according to him, shows that there is nothing to hide. Ingrid, who did not live in the house at the time of Diego's disappearance, was likely unaware of the existence of the remains. The police share this view, believing she was not involved in the crime. Despite the ongoing investigation, the statute of limitations for murder prevents the perpetrator from being arrested, unless there are legal exceptions, such as the continuity of crimes or public office that could suspend the limitation period. In Argentina, the statute of limitations for homicide ranges between 12 and 15 years, depending on the severity of the crime. Since the crime of murder has expired, the case will likely result in a civil action or a truth trial, focused on clarifying the facts without seeking a criminal conviction. However, the crime of concealment of evidence would not be time-barred, since the bones were discovered on May 20th, 2025. Javier, Diego's brother, acting on behalf of the family, filed a request with the judge on August 21st, 2025, to actively participate in the proceedings. With the request accepted on August 27, Javier gained the right to request evidence, interrogate witnesses, propose the presence of experts, and oppose any attempt to close the case. This active participation by the family seeks to ensure that all possible leads are explored and that the truth about Diego's fate is finally revealed, bringing some justice and closure to a story marked by pain and mystery. The investigation into the Diego Fernández Lima case is still ongoing, and media attention was initially heightened by the false association with the residence of a famous artist, Gustavo Cerati. This confusion brought the case into the spotlight, but media interest did not diminish even after the correction of this information, especially when the identity of the remains was confirmed to be Diego's. Diego's family, with Javier now formally involved in the case, hopes the investigation will reach a definitive conclusion. The visibility of the case, not only in Argentina but also in several countries, including Brazil, increases the pressure on authorities to bring the truth to light. The constant presence of the case in the media may be a crucial factor in maintaining pressure and ensuring the investigation continues. The forensic anthropology team, along with the prosecution and the police, is working to uncover the final mysteries surrounding Diego's death. With the active participation of the family and global attention, it is quite possible that the investigation will reach a satisfactory conclusion, clarifying the circumstances of the crime and determining responsibility for concealing the remains. Let me know in the comments what you think of this story, and let's end here with this intriguing case, where the truth will one day come to light. Thank you, and see you in the next case.